Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Literature,
where we apply the revolutionary Mott skill
to classic and contemporary works of prose.
So, join us once again, won't you?
Hello, and welcome back to the Lost Signals Reviews Literature. Today we're going to be talking about a story that I kind of stumbled upon, and it looked kind of interesting, so I wanted to check it out. It is something that actually just came out this year, called Tierra y Libertad by Madeline Ashby, and it was originally in the MIT Technology Review. I'm going to be your host, Steve Ramosi, joined here today by Scott Thurlow.
I'll be your robot worker.
Ian Manzer.
Lazy robots.
And Chris Morgan.
Does not compute.
So, I'm going to throw it to Chris to give us a somewhat funny logline.
If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have working robots.
Indeed we would.
A pretty funny logline, despite the fact that I'm concerned it makes
generally
not much
applies.
sense.
Trust us.
But yeah, so let's move on. We're going to start talking about the actual story in question here, and let's get started on the plot. Scott, you want to get us started?
All right, sure. So a young woman named Dash. This is sort of like, I took it to be, of course, 20 minutes-ish into the future, in which they have robot workers to basically work the farms and the fields and so forth of mass-produced crops. So Dash works for what I gathered a federal-ish agency. It's kind of agency, government agency, who goes and investigates when any problems crop up and arise from any of the big-time like megacorps who own the farms and the robots who are working on them and the maintenance workers and so forth. So she investigates like a malfunction, and I gather her job is to ascertain if indeed a certain AI of a certain company has achieved sentience, have achieved like consciousness essentially, and then go on from there, like analyze it, study it. And she sort of stumbles into, I guess, a small-time corporate conspiracy, like basically like a fraud, like angle, more or less. And so like, maybe we'll get this in scores, but while I enjoyed like the core of it, it was a fine framework. Like it sort of abruptly ends. Like not much is sort of achieved or solved. Like it's hard to describe because I felt as if the first time I read it, I thought to myself, am I missing chunks of the story? Did I like not copy it over and print it correctly? Because it sort of jumps from scene to scene here and there. Like that's the core of it. She uncovers a few details and then sort of the crime, unquote, is solved, and it's just like another corporate greedy like ploy. It's not really like the robots have achieved sentience. Like that's what I got out of it. Unless I'm wrong about it, you guys tell me.
Well, at the end, there's an emerging AI that was hidden in the vault.
Yeah. Yes.
And that was basically was starving the robots to create a false market for the batteries. So
hold on. I think that perhaps
maybe I misinterpreted.
Perhaps there may have been some misinterpretation here. What I got out of it, I think what was happening was they couldn't figure out why the AI stopped working, right? Like nobody could. And the reason for it was because they found out that if so like shaking the trees was creating dust that was killing the plant life in the area, at which point is this right? Like, at which point they were...
You're right about... I believe what happened is
it was creating dust. Oh, yeah, yes.
And the dust cloud was
so the reason,
plant life killing them.
The reason that they stopped was because they would go hungry if they kept doing it. Because they couldn't
the dust was covering the solar panels?
Couldn't,
okay.
Yeah, so the dust was covering the solar panels. Their batteries couldn't get recharged. Therefore, they stopped because they would starve to death. Thereby possibly causing... Like, there was a
was it a subplot where
an analogy to like because they thought they were going to starve to death, they stopped feeding humans. Basically, I think was the entire thing.
All right,
it was like an interesting point, but it was like it did go quickly and like it was tough to catch at first.
That's kind of my complaint, I guess, and maybe Raw might say that because of that, like I clearly didn't like get that same exact angle out of it.
Yeah,
because it was somewhat I think not as built up as it could have been.
I think. I don't know if it's criticism because I think it was intentionally done to have this effect.
Sure.
But you are in a way expected to know everything that Dash does.
Mhm.
So they never go out of the. It's sort of like, yeah, it takes place 20 minutes in the future, but you're expected to know all those 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And
That's well
sometimes
said.
it works. I've read a lot of science fiction that does that, where it doesn't spoon feed you what's been going on. It just pretends that, oh, you know how robot migrant labor works in California.
Yeah.
And that works, especially when it comes to building a mystery. It doesn't work when you're confused as to what's I think there's a lot of minutia in here that is unfair to expect the audience to know.
Or like some of the details in the world building are somewhat lacking, is what I've got out of it, or at least what I'm saying. And I like to think of myself usually as pretty good at being able to piece things together in a story such as this.
I think that a lot of the minutia is part of like building this, like as you guys said, 20 minutes into the future world, where it's like you could do all this stuff right now, like current time, right? But there has to be different verbiage to the way that people speak in order to tell you that it's not right now, it's slightly in the future, and AI is slightly more advanced than it is right now, but not, and starting to emerge as its own sentient species and things like that, which that part of it I really liked. And I liked all the kind of like subterfuge that was going on between humans, who I think part of what this story is about is that like humans don't really get what the hell is going on with AI. Like they know kind of they know that there are intelligent AIs emerging, but they don't know a lot of why or like, and that's what they're trying to figure out.
Well, that's all good and well for themes, I think, but for narrative, there's a whole lot of supposed corporate espionage going on.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which I think, Scott, your point seems to go nowhere. And I understood what they were trying to do, but again, Dash as a protagonist, and I guess I'm jumping ahead a little bit too much, perhaps a bit too much, but she has a slight failure in explaining her thought process, which again is built into who the character is. But I would say I would give this a strong 2, but perhaps not a full-fledged 3.
I think I'm going to give it a 2 as well. Actually, going back on it, I liked what this story did, and I was at no point bored with it. I thought it was a really good setup. I thought it was a very good middle, we'll say, I guess. The end was a little bit abrupt, which we have spoken about precast a little bit, and the and that's where I'm going to like dock points from it. But I think that the bones of this story are pretty solid, and I think it's a good idea, and a decent framework that it's put over. I am not going to give it full points, but yeah,
I have nothing to disagree with you on.
I will say this: I was looking at a 1 going into it. I maybe can be convinced of a solid 2, but what you just said, yeah, it's a solid bones of a story. But I felt as if the bones are all that's there. It's a bit, to me, it's more underdeveloped and underexplored than I would have liked it to have been, or think it could have been. So that's maybe what's tripping me up, like why I'm not giving it like as much credit as I might otherwise normally do in a story like this. Because of that.
No, go ahead.
My argument is it's really a framework to impart ideas,
Right.
and I think a very strong discussion of what AI would look like as an emerging consciousness. And the fact is, and they kind of use Dash as kind of an intermediate, not quite human,
Right.
in a way,
True.
but still a human. So as the intermediary between someone who can explain those ideas and someone who is closer to it than the corporate people.
yeah.
And you're right. I think that at points it added a subplot that wasn't necessary to it, but I think the framework of it worked well.
I will agree with that. So, like I said, I could be convinced, and I think you guys did make some good cases and points that I may switch over to a solid or soft even 2, but I think I've given works that aren't as good, or at least in retrospect, a 2 easier than this. So I think because of that, I'll try to maintain some integrity here and go on your side and probably move it up to a 2.
Chris, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I'm along with Scott. I was going into this thing. I was giving it a 1. I am going to give it a 2 because I love the ideas in it, especially since it's 2018 and there's wildfires everywhere. And the planet. I mean, this is unfortunately, so recognizable. I agree with Scott though. It feels like there's a lot of great ideas. I love the abrupt ending. My thing is, I really wish there was the minutia was different. It felt like Scott, it's like what Scott said. I feel like there's a lot of bones in here. I don't feel like there's connective tissue. That's the word I'm looking for. I feel like it's lacking some connective tissue because that ending is like one of my favorite kinds of endings. And I feel like
normally it would be like, yeah, I get what you're saying. But what I'm saying is,
I feel like it should have been that, or, that, and I'm like, I didn't have the impact that an ending like this usually gives me. But the ideas in the story are great. Considering what's going on now, it's way too easy to picture what's going on.
Sure.
You don't actually need that description. But it's just some connective tissue that it's missing. But I can't fault for what's in there, and what's in there is worthy of a 2.
Right.
Okay. I just want to. You said worthy of a 2.
I think we're all going
worthy of a 2. We're going to go. With
I just wanted to mention. I think that you're right. This could have been expanded a lot more into like a novel, even. Like I think of things like Neuromancer.
It's a good outline.
Well, yeah, like
for that. Yeah.
Blade Runner. This is like type of like near future sci-fi that kind of has like the Rage Against the Machine type of feel to it. But like this is interesting because has the AI element thrown into it. Anyway, I think it's going to be 2s across the board for plot, and then it'll take us to themes. Ian,
there are actually a number of themes in this. I'm going to concentrate on one, pass it along, and then go back if you guys don't tackle.
Go for
parts.
it.
Sure.
I'm a huge one, AI. And I love the portrayal of the development of AI in this work. As I've studied like computer science and perhaps the kind of frontier of what intelligence would be, it's interesting to me that a lot of what we believe artificial intelligence, we project humanity onto it. And I think there's a line in there which says that you can't a new being would not necessarily be like a human.
Absolutely.
And the fact that one of the AIs just made shapes, like kind of like developed art first.
That was a good detail, yes. I remember that.
And that this AI, in a way, very much like a survival animal. And I believe that that's really, that the idea of mortality is perhaps where you find consciousness. These feared death and started changing their patterns. Not coming up and like speaking or killing their... it just, all right, we're going to power down in
not
order
in a malicious
to...
way,
The simplest method to gaining like our life.
It's a choice they make to preserve themselves. It actually reminded me a bit of some of Asimov I've read. So there's a couple of ones where he does the human type robots there, but there's a particular story, I believe it's in the collection for iRobot, where where a robot, he dealt with the competing rules of an AI, and this one was it had to go get fuel to keep the station alive, but couldn't reach the fuel because it would kill him. So it kind of just wandered around in circles.
I was thinking the exact same one.
Yeah, and I think this is the closest I've read, and granted I don't read too much science fiction, to deal with what I think that Asimov story of what I personally believe would actually be the contradictions in artificial intelligence and how it might develop. Anyway, enough of my ramblings. I'm passing it along.
No, that was all well said, and I know that you personally are more interested in the AI angle, and I agree with almost all of that. I don't know what I want to add. I guess I would throw in the theme of sort of environmentalism and like corporate greed, as we somehow have been discussing like a lot this year, this season, it seems. But I certainly think it's there. Like the shady marketer guy, and like the rich, like he's basically might as well be like one of those old like Texan like oil miner like owners, like more or less Stevens, that is.
Yeah.
Right. And how they're like sort of exploiting the robot workers, if you will. And yeah, like, and how, again, it's because of the 20 minutes into the future picture of it, that California's become just not a lot, but more uninhabitable in a sense.
Right.
Or more,
Red is a preferred place to be.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like little details like that, like showing a picture of the world again, like, and how we're changing the environment and what it might be like soon enough.
This is like all they do in California now is grow pistachios. That's it.
That's like a Blade Runner kind of thing,
Yeah.
though. Like, it almost is
It's like
something very much-
pistachio almond country out here.
yeah, but it's just like populated by robots and just otherwise is like uninhabitable by at least by humans.
Yeah.
Just like Mars.
There's
Sort of.
soon enough.
But no, so I think it's that, and like again, like the rich business interests versus like what's good for like the rest of the lower class, if you will, or like just
Yeah.
anyone who isn't them. The 1% versus 99%, more or less, I guess is what I'm saying. So I think that was certainly like a bit in there, but definitely I think your A angle was like the major component of themes, and I think they were both well done.
Yeah, those are the two main ones, I think. Climate change and
Right.
AI, and how they're going to affect each other and things like that. There's a brief mention of ice in this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was waiting for one of you to
Which-
bring it up.
I was going to say,
Doesn't really come back to play much part, or
That's what I'm saying. Like, it was
anything.
dropped in,
It
but
was-
then wasn't really explored after that.
but what I was thinking was that there's also a story of the migrant worker,
Right.
migrant farmers, because I was looking at Diaz's story while we were talking, and I was trying to find. I don't think I think this might be more of a texture rather than a main theme,
Yeah,
but there definitely is a sense of the exploitation of the worker,
Sure.
right.
and that in a lot of ways it is kind of like a passive worker strike in some ways, like
Yeah, I think there's certainly a parallel to be
Well,
found
definitely. I'm sorry.
To bring up Diaz, though, I
Yeah.
think the most interesting secondary character in this.
I agree.
He has become, although his family grew up in this world, he's become a pawn of management.
Right.
And he has to defend himself, not because Dash is accusing him. I think in his own mind,
Right.
is to defend
Because of his
himself
own conscience,
against, like, oh, I was never part of this that happened. And she's like, all right.
there. Whatever, yeah.
Yeah,
You're still
Well,
culpable
no. To be
a
fair,
degree.
she suspected him of being compromised earlier
Sure,
in
but
the
I don't
story.
think she ever directly. I think it's more of his.
She doesn't
guilt.
accuse him, yeah, but he realizes that she thinks that he's a part of everything. And granted, it's never outright said that he's not a part of anything, of everything. I don't think he was, but like,
He's
you know.
token middle. He's token middle management, is what I gathered.
Right. Exactly, and that's kind of what it seemed like. And,
Sure.
and I agree with that. I think that I don't think that there's another super strong theme other than the two mentioned, which having two themes having two like strong themes
a pretty
in
quick
a,
read, yeah.
whatever this is, 10-page story is pretty solid. So I'm going to give it strong merits for those.
Me too.
I think you guys mentioned most of the stuff that I was going to talk about
Yep.
in terms of AI and climate change. But yeah, like, it's really interesting to see those playing off of each other in a sci-fi short story. And I think everything else is a little bit of window dressing. Like, she mentions Zeiss to talk about it. She mentions Iran to like kind of,
Right.
hey, remember this? Like, we're these are things that are still going on. These are things that from
use
our
manual
time
labor.
or the past that will still, exactly, that will still affect the future. But I'm going to give it a
Yep.
strong one.
I agree.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
All right, Chris, let's talk about the antagonists.
I guess the antagonists are Gleason and Stevens. Corporate greed, as we were talking about,
Personified.
personified.
Sure.
The thing they weren't super fleshed out, but what I liked about them, and I'm wondering if I know we talked about this being a lot of bones without like it needs connective tissue, but their detachment from the story, I wonder if it was kind of like their detachment from you got
They're
whole
the faceless
well,
organization.
the thing is, you have all right. It's like any company, okay? You've got the upper management that thinks it's in touch with the worker. It says, "Hey, welcome to our family," but really they have no idea what it's like to be, in the trenches. Whereas Diaz, even though he's middle management, he worked his way up there. So these guys just seem very out of touch, and I think obtuse would be the right word. So it's one of these things where they're there. I'm not really sure if they're if to the extent that they're developed or undeveloped is intentional or not, but they do seem to be like that detached 1%.
May I make a more depressing argument?
Sure.
Please.
Perhaps there's no need for them, or perhaps it's purposely, or not, there's no need for them to be noteworthy, because we all know what corporate greed looks like in today's environment.
I was going to say something like that. Yeah.
Like America is plagued with these people.
Yeah.
I can hear these names and put in Jeff Bezos or the Koch brothers or any of the other like the villains of our modern age, that they don't need to be fleshed out because they're so omnipresent in society. Yes. And to point them out would be
almost redundant, kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a really good point. That is a really good point. They're like the faces and bylines you see, and that's about the extent of their substance, except what political power their money buys or does,
I would also argue they're just as like formless, I guess, in this as they would be to the AI, who was actually the center of this story, right? Like
yeah, that's also well said.
Strangely enough, the AI who is the real threat, I guess, and the reason that she is there to either shut it down or allow it to continue, is like the most neutral party of everything. They are doing what they do, or it is doing what it does. Like it's not. There's a lot of ways to turn the AI into the villain of this, and I'm glad that this story doesn't do that. So I mean, I think that they are good, like faceless, kind of just forgettable, corporate goons. Basically, they're like the villains from Captain Planet.
Well,
maybe that ties in pretty well, but yes, but
Ian, I think you did answer my question, I suppose, whether it was by design, whether they were just kind of like faceless and underdeveloped, because what's the point in needing them to be developed?
Yeah, no, like I was going to again, like
that's
to give them pathos.
We don't want to give them pathos. So yeah, I agree with Ian.
So what are you giving it?
I'm giving it a 1.
All right.
I mean, you guys know me. Of course, I would always go for like
power.
It's both like an abstract, but also like corporeal thing, because they're the faceless front of like a mega corporation, a heartless corporation, more or less. So yeah, like I think that was intentional. I think that's a good point that you made, and because of that, and because like they serve their purpose as antagonists as well, on top of all that, I'm giving them a solid 1.
I'm giving them a very strong Jeff Bezos pointy-headed 1.
Yes,
Lex Luthor.
Nice.
All right, so that's 1s all around. And then that's going to take us to protagonist. I'm going to talk about who the protagonist is in this, and it's clearly Dash, our main character. And she is... I like her a lot. She has, like... There are a lot of strangely detective noir-esque
elements, yes.
Genre feels that I get from this. And I like that a lot. It reminds me of those good, sci-fi detective stories, and even to some extent, like I mentioned earlier, Blade Runner, and I really enjoy that about her character. She's intelligent, and
capable,
but also is, has her harsh backstory, which, like, that's another thing that I would have loved to hear more about, like what happened with her backstory and stuff like that. You get like a flash of it at the end. I think that could have been developed more. Of course, if Madeline Ashby had done a longer story, we would have certainly got more of that. But I really liked her as the main character. I thought that she did a good job fleshing everything out. Everything made sense. She didn't make any stupid moves, and that's pretty much it. I thought she was good.
No, you said a lot of it, so yeah, I enjoyed her as a character. I'm probably going to end up giving her a 1 at the end of the day, but you also said that I would like to see more of her and more of those aspects. So, like, maybe that's perhaps somewhat ironically, more evidence to give her a 1 because I like what I did see and wanted more of it. But you're right, like, she was, like, the person for the job, and she was, like, at least one of the details we did get is that she's known for being very spot on about when she goes on her cases, we'll call them, I suppose. All right, so, like, that was all fine, and yeah, I think the details we did get did flesh her out. I would like to have seen her fleshed out a bit more than that, but what is there is solid, so I will give it a solid 1.
You brought up Blade Runner. I'm still not 100% convinced she's human, but neither here nor there. She's a tool as well. She has a handler.
Yeah,
She's
that's true. Good point.
not only is she mentally a lot like the things that she's investigating, but her purpose is a lot like them as well. And I think that, again, as a vehicle for looking at AI, I think it was really well done.
Well said.
Yep.
I thought you were just going to nod.
No.
That's my answer.
I was trying to decide while you guys were talking, which is why hence my delay. She did serve her role as a protagonist. I would like to have learned more about her, but I was thinking the same thing Ian was. I was wondering if she was an AI or not. And I think that, yeah, I'd like to know more about her, but given that gray area,
the uncertainty.
The uncertainty of it, I think has moved me to a 1 because I was really on the fence. So I'm going to probably give it a softer 1, but it's definitely going to be a 1.
Sounds like 1s all around. And we are going to move on to supporting characters. Scott.
So you guys brought it up earlier. I think Diaz is the most interesting one because of his where he stands, like I guess in the hierarchy and like how he connects to the other characters within this little mystery that's happening. So I'll probably give, like, he's probably my favorite. But I mean, do we count the AIs, like each little robot, like the army of robots themselves? They're sort of like.
Well, I think
detailed,
the AI is as
covered
one,
that before,
right?
Yeah, sure. Sure. I guess we'll call it that. But other than that, there's not many. Like, I guess we can have Andrew, her boyfriend, who she talks to on the phone, like briefly for like 2 conversations. I guess that sort of grounds her humanity, if you indeed think she's human.
Batstone is her handler.
And her handler at like whatever agency that she works at, future fictional agency.
Or grounds her AI if it's a fake program.
Sure, I knew you were going to say that, and like I get it. Like it fits either way, really. All right, it's like the Voight Comp thing, but I mean, given that then that's like 5 characters, 6 total in this whole story, more or less. But I think, like, again,
it's standard for a short story.
I know we keep saying this, I don't want to harp on it, but I would like to have seen some more fleshed out stuff featuring maybe a couple of more characters, or at least maybe fleshing out Diaz himself, if no one else.
The Adventures of Diaz.
A bit more, yeah.
Actually,
in the sequel.
Actually, we know more about Diaz than pretty much anybody else in the book, in the story.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, that's a good point.
I mean, there are in parentheses, but I mean, we do know it. It's there.
Sure, you're right. That is information that's contained therein. So, like, yeah, I think it's just enough for, like, a soft one. Like, it's fine. Again, given that we keep saying that it would have been nice to have a little bit more details, a little bit more minutia built up. But other than that, that's all I got to say on it.
Nothing else.
Yeah, sorry, there's not many
I'm right with Scott.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't have much more to say about the supporting characters either.
I'll take the liberty of saying
that Andrew and Batstone did a job. They were basically window dressing for the story, which makes sense. It's a short story. You only got so much room. And Diaz, I really liked him. I really liked his part that he played, and I thought that he was a well-drawn character. So I'm going to give it a pretty strong 1 just based on the strength of him. Like, in terms of a short story, if you give me one strong side character, I'm all in for a side character. So I'm going to give it a 1. It sounds like there's 1s all around.
Yep. Believe so.
Weak, strong. I give it the 1.
1 and 0 are your only gods. All right. That's going to move us to dialogue. Ian, what do you think?
Ooh.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough one. I agree. I
don't remember. So that gives me a default 0.
I will jump in. This is the one I was wavering, probably one of the most, if not the most, on. I have one line picked out that I thought was pretty good, which I shall read. It's just, Dash examined the rows of silent machines. She could have said, it's not dialogue though, made this style, but it's still an internal thing. She could have said that the perception of intention was little more than a mechanism the human brain evolved to defend itself from the cosmic horror of being alive. And I'm always going to like a line like that.
It's great style.
Yeah, exactly. So the dialogue itself, the exchanges, good point that, like, I remember it well enough, but not super well. It served its purpose, I guess I was going to say. It was fine, but it wasn't like stand out to me. So again, I may, at least for now, go on your side with a default 0.
And there's enough dialogue in there. Looking on your page there, plenty there. That I don't remember anything bad. It's just that I don't remember anything at all.
It's sort of like, like procedural almost in a sense, because this is somewhat of a procedural, I guess I'll say. So it's not like a mark against it. It's just that I don't think it's strong enough for a 1 for me.
Do you know what's funny? The thinking about the dialogue out of context, I usually remember the responses, the one-word responses to her statements or questions, even though what she's saying is more poignant. I remember that, the ouch or whatever. I'm with you. I'm going to give it a 0 because I think this is one thing where having things that are underdeveloped, the dialogue needs something upon which to stand, and there really isn't. It needed a little more.
And for those who can't see, Steve-O is
flipping through his copy.
Through the dialogue. No, I mean, I was looking through to see if there were any lines that like really stood out to me. And the thing is, I'm kind of with you guys. I like the dialogue, but it's nothing standout. I don't really remember it that much. And what's disappointing is I remember a lot of the description. Like, the description was so good in this, and then the dialogue was kind of just rote. Just explanation of what's happening in the scene.
It was what it needed to be for the story,
the
but no more.
Really
no
fleshed
less.
things out and made the I don't want to say analogies, but spoke to what was going on behind the scenes and what the thought processes were that were happening, and the dialogue didn't really speak to that as much, unfortunately. So I think I'll probably have to stick with I'll probably have to go with a 0 with you guys on dialogue because there wasn't that standout line. There weren't any of the standout lines in terms of dialogue, but there were a lot of them in terms of the description.
Yes, I'll agree with that.
And
which we'll get to in a second.
And the rest of it. So
nothing bad. It's just a default 0.
Right.
Yep.
Unfortunately,
that's basically all I can say as well.
So that being said, let's talk about style.
This is one where I'm actually kind of on the fence with, because again, I do keep coming back to the point that I really want to see this fleshed out. I really would love it if she would take this and put it into a bigger work, because there's so many good ideas here, but I don't know if there's enough to hang style on. Like the what you said about that line you said was great, but a lot of the other stuff was kind of, this is this and this is this. And I really wanted a little more color to it. So I'm probably leaning towards a 0 unless somebody can give me more.
Yeah, perhaps think of it this way. I'm leaning towards a 1 because of the line I just read and what you mentioned just before, Steve-O. Many of the descriptions were quite excellent, I thought. What was there was great. So think of it this way, Chris. You wanted more of it because what was there was pretty great. You know what I mean? It would be nice if there was more, but that means the style itself sort of left you wanting more of it, which in my mind is an argument for a 1 than a 0. So go ahead, E.
All right, I'm going to paint you a picture that I believe the author does with this work. I can picture the pistachio fields. I can picture the town that should be dust covered, but isn't. It's kept clean. I can picture the AIs lounging on the ground.
Lazy robots.
Lying inert.
Human, robot, same lazy workers.
Jesus.
I can picture the California Love spray painted.
Yeah.
I have a vivid idea of what
Impression,
this
yeah.
place looks like, and to me that's a sign. Especially this is one area that everything takes place in. The fact that I have that, I picture that vault in my head of what it looked like, and I think that speaks well to the that color you're looking for.
Yeah, I'm sort of
I'll say this. I was hooked on style from the first line, and it didn't disappoint for the rest of the story. The last stars clung stubbornly to the cool violet canopy hanging over the San Joaquin Valley. That's an awesome opening line.
Yeah, it's very solid, for sure. I agree with that.
The rest of the story
maintains that level of...
Exactly. That's lines and lines like that that line and lines like it are the reason that I gave dialogue a 0 because the dialogue didn't live up to that style. And I love the style in this story. I really like the picture it paints. I really like the story it tells. And that ties into, I think, the themes as well.
The flashing of a watch.
Okay, so basically, it's not just because I spent a summer in Southern California that I could picture all this stuff. All right. Well, no, but seriously,
Were you one of the lazy human workers working the pistachio field?
Oh, hell no. I used to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and drive from Ojai to Glendale.
All right.
But
Tell the robots, Grandpa.
To be lazy on the set.
I was not lazy at all.
But anyway.
No, but
so you claim.
But that's also the other thing is you have to. That's why I asked you guys because you have to kind of work past your bias.
Sure.
Because I know what I pictured, but I'm like trying to figure is it because I know Southern.
I think
California.
it's because it's effective style and description.
Listen, man, you may know Southern California, but I don't think you know the pistachio fields.
I don't know the pistachio fields, but no. All right, you guys convinced me. I'm going to give it a 1.
I mean, give it a 0 if you want to. We'll just
No.
I just offered you my evidence and reasoning why I did and why I think you might. But yeah.
No, because with what's there, it is very descriptive. I agree with you.
All right.
I was just trying to figure out if it was me filling in the gaps or if you guys got that.
Sure.
Like, all right.
I'm just gonna move on. I had like 3 more jokes lined up.
Don't worry about
I'm
it.
gonna
Please.
skip them. They'll get boring.
Put it in your
after a while.
blog.
What blog?
We're going to move to recommendation with me. I definitely recommend reading this. It's a pretty short story. It won't take you that long to read, and it is enjoyable if you like a good like near fiction story. Like Scott has mentioned, like we've all mentioned a bit, it's going to leave you wanting more, which I don't think is necessarily...
No, I agree.
You know, like, good. That means it
That
was
could
well
be
told.
positive,
I
yes.
want more of this story, you know, but...
It's
that
too
being
long.
said, I'm gonna. Ian wanted it to be 1 page long.
Anyway.
I'm gonna give it a 1 for that.
Yeah, I'm probably going to recommend it. It's not like the thing I would recommend, like, that first would spring to mind, but having read it, if someone else stumbles across it and is like, hey, I saw the story, and did you read it? I'm like, yeah, I happen to have. And yeah, it was pretty solid. And yes, I would like, it's like I said, it's almost sort of, it feels almost like a draft, where, like a treatment for that could be expanded to a much larger setting. And as you said, that's more positive, I think, than negative, because it does leave you wanting, like, while it may suck in a sense that we were like, oh, I wish it was more fleshed out, that means that it was good enough that you're like, I'm interested in this world. I'm interested to see where I could see more of it. So yeah, I'm going to recommend it overall pretty solidly. So solid 1.
Ian, before you start, may I offer you a better story? For sale, robot shoes never worn.
Robot treads unused.
Yeah.
I recommend the abridged version.
Of course.
No, I like this. I recommend for the portrayal of AI, which again I went on in detail about. It's very well done. And again, it's a pretty short story.
Mm-hmm.
So read it.
Yeah, and you can get through it pretty quickly, which is kind of a bonus if you press for time.
And when AI takes your job at Amazon warehouse, you get to have all the time in your world to read these short stories.
Or write them.
Yeah, I was going to say that this is a great conversation starter, as I had a couple conversations about this story. And I recommend it. I do like what was there, even though I wish there was more. But I think that's why I'm going to recommend it, because if more people read this, we'll hear more from her. Mm-hmm. And I know I really want to hear more from her. I don't know how many stories she's written thus far, but there's enough good ideas and there's enough style here that I really want to. I would be very interested in hearing what's next from her. So I'm definitely going to recommend it because it's a good story to start conversations. It's definitely a good author. She seems like a very good author to start supporting.
Well, that being said, I believe that I saw that she also has a novel out. So go
that I would check out.
Find her novel.
All right, I'll check that out.
I hope that I'm right about that. It's Madeline Ashby. Anybody who's interested, go check out Tierra y Libertad, and if you like it, check out her possible novel that exists. And I think that's going to do it for us. Looking at the scores,
leave us.
We all gave it an 8 for the exact same reasons. We're very boring today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to give us an 8.
We agree.
Aggregate score.
And I think 8's pretty solid. 8's about right, I think.
So let's call it there. This has
Mhm.
been the Lost Signals Reviews Literature. I have been your host, Steve Ormosi, here with Scott Thurlow,
See you in the next harvest season.
Ian Manzer,
I'm definitely going to use a go tell it to a robot grandpa more often.
and Chris Morgan.
Good night.
Editing and engineering by Jonathan Ian Manser. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.